First of all, what is a novation? This is exactly where I wanted to start because people use this term novation. They kind of throw it around and it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So there's three main ways that I've seen people use novations. Number one, you partner with the seller on a fix and flip, meaning like, hey, your property needs some work. The cash offer doesn't work. Let's agree on a lower price. We'll do the remodel and partner with you, and then we will sell it and split the proceeds or do some kind of profit split at the end. That is not how we use novations. I know people can be successful at that. I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole because they're still living in it usually, and like there's just a lot of risk that goes on there. It can be done successfully. We just don't do that. Number two is how like Eric Brewer and the Brewer method, from what I understand, teach it, where it is pitched as a price guarantee, meaning they have the right to market the property on the MLS, Zillow, Redfin, wherever, and to their buyers list. And then they will buy it at that price if they can't move it. Number three is how we pitch it. It is not a price guarantee. We're being very transparent that we are not your buyer. Because you wanted a higher price, we're not the best fit. However, we can send it out to our list of thousands of cash buyers and market it on websites like the MLS, Zillow, Redfin to maximize the most amount of eyeballs on your property. We just need reasonable access and time to make that happen to get up to your higher price. Any questions on these three types before I move on?
No, this is perfect. This is how we do our novations as well.
Okay, perfect. Very, very key between 2 and 3, especially like when you're training this with your team or you have like new people joining on your team. The lines can get blurred between number 2 and 3, and there's some confusion that it can cause for sellers because they're hearing all the things that they want to hear and not, and so they'll think that it is a guarantee even if you're advocating this appropriately. You have all the documentation, you're telling them that you're not the right buyer. Sometimes they still have selective hearing. So that's something we really want to emphasize, which is we third person low anchor, we beat up the cash offer, we determine that that is not the right fit. And only then can we say, hey, what if there was a way that we could get you a higher price? I'm not even sure if your property would qualify. It's called our equity protection program. That's how we pitch it. That's what we call it. We want to avoid the word novation when we're talking with sellers just because it causes confusion. Best part about novations, owner occupants pay more than investors, right? That's always going to be the added benefit is you can get just a higher price. Investors are always going to want some kind of margin. So on cash deals, when we're wholesaling, that's still always going to be below market value. Well, what happens when a lead wants $10,000 over your max allowable offer on a cash price? You can either break the rules and come up on your cash number, and that kind of muddies the waters, or you create a headache for your dispo team and their ability to move it. Or we have another option that just allows us to get more properties under contract like a novation. Since we added novations about a year and a half or 2 years ago, almost 50% of our contracts are actually novations. And in Q3 and Q4 of every year, just because of market seasonality, we get significantly more novations than in Q1 and Q2. Those are predominantly cash contract month quarters for us for whatever reason. And our average novation deal size is just over 30,000 to date. So it's right up there with our cash prices. Of course, our cash contracts, because we do a lot of those as flips, the average deal size overall of those is going to be higher, but still it is above average or right around the average with novation. I know sometimes as a stigma, like we're kind of nervous with a novation because our buyer or our seller gets to see what our novation fee is. I can only think of one seller ever that we've had a problem with where they saw our novation fee and they kind of balked about it. And we can talk about the right way to pitch it. But 50,000, 60,000, I don't know that we've ever done a $70,000 novation, but it's been pretty high. Tori, do you know what our highest is? I want to say it's about 60 something.
Not off the top of my head, no. But in the last year, we've definitely had multiples that were 50 and 60,000.
How about the worst part about novations? This is always the toughest one, is there's a temptation to jump to the higher price right away and just go with that equity protection program pitch. instead of negotiating a true lowest acceptable cash offer. So this is a great way to actually shrink your deal sizes or to not get contracts at all, because you're making it about the price instead of the seller's situation and their pain and how we can solve that. So this is why doing novations with new people when they're starting out is really tough, because there's a tendency to make it about the numbers, and the people that we're meeting with, it's not about the numbers. They have a problem that we need to solve. So I alluded to this: selective hearing from your sellers. You can do everything right, and sometimes on that post contract call, your transaction coordinator will reach out to them and they'll say, oh, I thought this was a guarantee, even though on all the paperwork multiple times it says we have the right to market this. This is going on the MLS explicitly. We even, Tori, if you can talk about the paperwork, we even make them sign like a listing agreement and a listing disclosure with a POA. Can you talk about the documents that we have them sign just briefly?
Yeah, absolutely. So up front at their appointment where we actually sign the contract with them, they're signing the contract. They're giving us an authorization to sign listing documents and field offers. They're giving us the authorization to market that party, or to market that property to a third party and novate the agreement. And then they're also signing a disclosure for whichever realtor team that we're partnering with. So we have a couple of different realtor teams. We have a third party MLS disclosure that just says, this is the realtor team that we are partnering with. This is all about them. They are going to put a sign. They're going to put a lockbox. They're going to give you a property disclosure. You're going to be hearing from them. Yes, I authorize them to talk to us, which we can. That was a document that was prepared by one of our realtor teams, but I'm more than happy to share that so that you guys have it.
I was going to say, Tori, if you could kind of consolidate all our documents into a Google Drive link and just throw that in the chat. Please don't just use it at your discretion. Review it and see what works in your state or your situation, but we're happy to provide those. That was actually a suggestion from our realtors, because we were just having problems with the sellers. They're like, wait a minute, who's this agent? Like, I thought I was working with you guys. And it helps kind of make that connection of, we are going to be connecting you with an agent. Here's the disclosure information that you're signing.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, guys.
And then how about the POA, Tori?
So that's our authorization to sign listing docs. So I'll make sure that's included as well. But it's a limited power of attorney that just allows us to field all of the offers. I have personally never had an objection with it. But the reason that we do that is so that they don't have to deal with the headache of determining what a good offer is or is not and deciding how to negotiate those terms. All they have to worry about is their contract with us gives them the price that they want, and we're taking care of the rest. So we're removing all of that headache, and in exchange, they're just allowing us to field those offers and give them the good news when we have it, that we have that final buyer matched up with their home.
It's also so we can get the listing live in a timely manner, right? Corey, can you talk a little bit about, like, the first 6 months we did Novations, we actually didn't get assigned POA. What was that like?
Certainly. So if you don't get assigned POA, think about this. We often use these for more rural properties. You have to have somebody go out to sign the listing disclosure packet. You have to have somebody go out and sign every single counter, every single offer. And if you think about it from the seller's perspective, all of a sudden I'm locked in at $300,000, and you're going to put a paper in front of me that says there's an offer for $375,000. And then I have to describe to you why the 375 isn't the new number you're getting, what that means, why this could potentially fall out, why it's not a certain thing, and that we're going to go back and counter it. So it just creates more hoops to jump through when on your side, you know how you're planning to negotiate that. The biggest thing that they care about is that they're going this route because they want the ease, convenience, and certainty. And so that actually goes in as part of our pitch, that when we're doing this, the intent is we're going to handle the whole portion of the transaction so you can focus on getting ready to move on to the next thing. And for most people, like, they don't want to have any other negotiations and want to be included in this. They just want to know that their price is going to be the same at the end. And then they're looking for, how do I make this as easy as possible myself?
Exactly. And we've seen, how many times have we seen, like, when we're trying to do all the paperwork stuff back and forth and communicate with them, they're like, I thought this was going to be easy. You guys were pitching, ease and convenience, and this is not easy. You guys are communicating with me every day and making this my problem and asking me all these questions. And so the POA is absolutely essential. Do you guys do a POA, Priscilla?
We do, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, we've done it like that from the beginning, and it's been super helpful. Neil, when have we ran into issues with the POA? Is it when it's in a trust?
Trust or LLCs,
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, that's the
Tori,
only
how do
time
we
we've ran
handle
into it.
Tori, how do we handle those?
So we haven't actually had an issue with that. I'm actually thinking of the Wrangler Street property we recently closed. The way that our escrow officer overcame that was she provided the POA alongside the trust documents showing that the person who granted us that limited power of attorney was also the signer on behalf of the trust. So that may be something to explore to see if your title company will accept that. But it was just that additional documentation where they proved that that person was allowed to make decisions on behalf of that trust. And she was the one that gave us that limited power of attorney.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely look into that.
Which brings us to the last bullet point here. Strong agent and title company relationships. Corey, how many different agent groups did we go through before we found a winner?
Quite a few. Gosh, I mean, we've probably used 4 or 5 different brokerages at this point, if not more. And then of that, we've probably used a dozen to 2 dozen agents along that path. It's an education process to get new people on board. And so every time we go into a new area, like we've gotten better at this, but we have to basically like sell the agent on why this is a benefit to them first. And then they have to be able to sell their broker on why it makes sense for them, unless you're talking directly with an agent who is the broker. And then after that, you have to get to know each other. And you'll realize that your mode of operation and how quickly you probably want things to work may be a little different than what they expect. So it's definitely, it's a process to get a good partner on board.
And Tori, what do we pay as the agent commission?
Yeah, so because we're operating in volume, we offer 2% commission to the listing side. And then we set that expectation really early that we don't want to go above 2.5% on the buyer agent side. Now, if that's the only way we can do the deal is to pay that other agent 3%, then we will make sure that the numbers fit and we can negotiate with that. But that 2% on the listing side saves us a bunch of money. And they're still seeing the benefit because we're doing the lead generation, so they don't have to pay for that. We're handling all of the initial conversations. They don't have to deal with that. All they really have to do is take something when it's ready to list and do their marketing magic and help us from contract to closing.
Now, I do know companies out there, both in Collective Genius and not, that they utilize a flat fee listing service, and then they have their dispo team handle these novations. We don't, and then they pay like 0.5% or 1%. We don't do that for multiple reasons. Number one, just the time and bandwidth thing. And because a lot of we go statewide, so we really want people that have like local knowledge and local connections to list with. Number two, from a liability standpoint, even if you're using a flat fee service, yet you're the one like communicating and negotiating, and you don't have like a strong third party, because we use flat fee listing services on like wraps or other properties that we sell, just not on novations, because we really want that. We want that, like, I guess intermediary is the best way to describe it, to remove liability from ourselves. Where people get into trouble is where they're listing the property and then they're also making a spread on the novation, and that can be considered bad. That can get you into big trouble. Okay, last slide I had before we run through the questions was on just the sales process to kind of bring this full circle, because this again is the most important part, and the biggest struggle that we've seen and that we've had is the temptation to jump through the different hoops too fast, too early, try to make it about, well, if I give the seller more options, they're just going to decide which one is best for them. And that's not true. It's not about the options. So in order to get to the real truth of what the seller needs, not what the seller wants, what the seller needs to get to their next thing, it starts with a third person price anchor and then fully exhausting cash as an option. So this is our sales process. We cannot jump proactively to terms or novations, because that'll sabotage ourselves. And what we don't want to do, like if we're jumping to a terms or novations conversation, like your lead management team, they shouldn't be using any of these phrases or terms. Their goal is selling the appointment, right? If you're trying to do this over the phone, it's going to convert significantly less. Training all of these options on your team at once is extremely difficult. I would highly advise everybody focus on cash for at least the first 90 days before learning something new. I know it's really difficult because you get a lot of flavors of leads and appointments, so that's not always possible, but that's what we've determined to be the most effective. Otherwise, they will always jump to the higher price that we can offer. Corey, anything to add there?
Yeah, that's such a big one. The biggest thing I would say that in our learning process here is like you're presenting best alternative options, but instead of saying like, here's my best alternative options, which is cash, terms, and novation, sometimes it's really helpful to say like your alternative options are you go through the pain and hassle of listing with a realtor, you can keep it yourself, or you end up going with us. And then us can be one of these three, but we can't present them at the same time. When we get into that, and the reason this is so important is you actually have to create a barrier in their mind to show them the value. So when I say that, like if you say that my cash price is 300,000, and then I say my novation price is 310,000, that might sound like a lot of money to some people, but you'd be surprised how many sellers would just go back to the cash price because they hear certainty and they hear speed. And so you actually, at least from my experience, have to create at least $30,000, if not $40,000 of a price difference to get people to go to a novation. Now that might mean your cash price ends up having to like anchor a little bit lower. And I would find for us that like, as we get to a little bit more rural areas where our buyer network isn't as strong, like we push people towards innovation. So we cap our cash price even lower. So maybe we could have tried to push a 275 on cash and instead we stick at 260 and then we come up to 300 on novation. But that gap is really the value you're creating in their mind to provide reasonable access and time.
The other thing I'll add to is when we're at the appointment, there's actually very few appointments where all three of these options become viable: cash, terms, and novation. We have to determine first, what is their reason for selling? Of course, do they need all the money? Do they need a lump sum? If they need a lump sum, we're not going to discuss terms at all. We're just going to discuss cash. And then if cash doesn't work, equity protection program. If they don't need all the funds up front, we're going to go from cash to terms. We're not going to go through to an equity protection program. If they're really looking to maximize price, they don't need all the money up front, that's when terms becomes more viable. Or of course, your low equity situations like sub twos with no equity, then pitching innovation isn't going to work because that's why they're scheduling an appointment with you. Any other questions on this before we go to the questions one by one in the agenda?
Just something you said kind of clicked for like out there areas. Novation might be the way to go, and you just cap your cash price lower, because we do get a lot of those like weird, funky mountain towns and stuff. When you're doing those, are you finding like a local agent to list typically, or just one of your go-to agents and just have them do it remotely?
Sorry.
So the current brokerage that we are partnered with is very far reaching. And that was one of the reasons that they became our primary. So in those areas, they typically partner with another agent in their brokerage that's local, and they're still running point on the transaction, but then they have boots on the ground and they're kicking them a 20% referral fee from their commission. In the event that we don't have a local agent there, I typically hit the phone book. You'll want to allot probably 2 to 3 hours for this because you want to hit more than one agent, and you're just going to interview them. Unfortunately, you're going to probably end up paying 2.5% instead of 2% if it's not somebody that you're sending multiple deals to. But you can typically find somebody that you get along with that has a decent marketing strategy just by calling a few of those local agents.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I guess the question I'm asking is like, yeah, is it worth doing what you're saying and like setting this up with somebody brand new who has never done this, who probably has a lot of questions, blah, 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 but maybe knows the local market better than your person, like who's maybe in the city in Boise in your case or whatever?
So for me, it is absolutely worth it because I feel very confident that I can explain the process and go over the paperwork with them. That's not always a viable option. So sometimes it's better to stick with who you know and listing remotely.
Right.
But it's a bit of a trade-off just based on your comfort level.
Totally. Yep. That makes sense.
I think a big piece of that too is your title agent, right? Like part of the reason why Tori has confidence in all the paperwork and everything is because we can say, hey, this gal at Pioneer Title is who we use, and she's done 100 for us.
Yeah.
And like, if you have any questions about how this is going to look on the closing statement, or how you guys are going to get paid and how everything's going to get settled, like, you can just ask her.
Mhm.
And so they're like, oh, it must be legit then. You know what I mean?
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
But in the rural towns, I mean, at the end of the day, like, our goal is to get the property sold for that seller. And so the person that's local, that has access to buyers or knows neighbors or whoever, is absolutely going to be the most likely to do that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Would you say that this is a strategy you're using primarily in more like out there markets in your greater market, or is it a mix of everything?
Corey, you want to take that one?
Yeah, we use it everywhere. The biggest thing is that it gives us an extra lever, right? So if we're in our primary metro, Boise, we know that we're going to have a good buyer network there for our cash sales. However, it's also the most desirable area. So there's going to be the biggest demand for single family home buyers there.
Right.
So it just gives us an extra lever again to get another $30,000 to $40,000 higher than our cash price would be. And I was just looking it up, and kind of across our portfolio, just this year. I know Ryan had mentioned like over time, I think our average is over 30, but this year alone, it's like 28,000, and our cash contracts are 35. So it's a really profitable way, not just in rural areas, but in the heart of your community, to find great options and making some good deals. Where I think we've actually seen really, really good success with like certain areas that have like manufactured homes on foundations, off foundations, with a little bit of land. These are usually people who the houses need work and need some TLC, but they can get financed and make owner occupants really happy. So like it can give you a lot of options. We have a lot of success selling to people who get VA loans, FHA loans. Sometimes, very often, Ryan and Tori push the realtors that they work with to market it as such, because then we might come in and put some repairs on the back end. And a traditional agent may look at something that needs a little bit of siding repair and say, no way that this can go FHA or a VA loan. And then because we have the experience to say like, yes, you can do that, you just have to get the inspection done and then do whatever work is required. We've made a really good profit on some of those just because we've been willing to push for it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Do you guys?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, James. Go ahead.
I was just gonna round out that thought. We've had some success too. Like we have one right now that we listed as an assumption because it was on, I think, FHA, and a lot of realtors just don't know enough about assumptions to really pitch that to clients. Our agent knows how to do it, so we're able to be like a little more effective with FHA and VA loans, which has been good. Just takes longer.
How much, or are you guys ever putting money into it, like Corey was saying, before it's selling? And have you ever had any horror stories with that where it doesn't end up selling on the back end? Because it's always a risk that I feel like we're like juggling, where it's like, do we put $10,000-$15,000 into it with the owner living in it, and the possibility of ruining the floors or whatever, and then hoping that it sells? Like, that's kind of something that we haven't taken that risk on yet. We're willing to do those buyer concessions on the back end, but we haven't done anything large like siding, flooring, or anything like that yet.
All right, this is a good one. So the short answer is no. I don't think we've ever put in more than like 500 or $1,000 into a true novation. The most we'll do is a cleaning or like some yard work to help spruce it up for photos. You'll always get good bang for your buck there. But it all comes back to margin, right? If your deal is big enough, a lot of times what we've done, not to go too much into the weeds, but we convert those to installment contracts where we actually go on title if we're going to spend $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, and then we essentially own the property. But now you've just turned it into a flip. Corey, you want to add any more context around that?
So here's a scenario that happens pretty often, is that we will maybe do a very light cleaning. Maybe we don't really put much into it besides photos for the marketing side. And then we'll have a buyer come in, and then during the inspection, they'll say, I need all these items done. We've had some success negotiating just seller credits on the back end instead of actually putting the repairs in. So that can be a way to get around actually putting the capital up front, but still allowing the transaction to go through. And the second part of that is we've had some success when we do have to do things, like we have had to finish out bathrooms to get qualifications, we've had to put in some flooring. We have had to do siding in the past. A lot of times we work with contractors who are willing to get paid out of closing. And so that's a way of just keeping cash within your business. And then it's usually in a pretty short time frame, like a week or two to closing or past inspection period. At that point, it's something that's been agreed to. That also is a good area in time where we can go back for price renegotiations. And so let's say we find that the reason the siding needs to be replaced is because there's wood rot and there's mold underneath, and that those both have to get fixed in order to pass the appraisal. Oftentimes we've been able to go back and be like, the only way we can get this to go through, we didn't know about this. Did you know about this? And we ask them like, okay, did you know about this and not tell us? Like, they're going to back up, and then it gives you the chance to go back for a $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000 price reduction that can make it pencil on both sides. So I hope that kind of answers your question, Priscilla.
No, it does. That was good. Thank you.
Now, if it's pre-offer, like remember the Rigby property, Corey? So we actually listed that as a novation, and the seller had some leak in the kitchen. And so he redid a lot of the work himself. And so when we went to look at the property and got photos and whatever, it looked fine. So we went through the normal novation process. But then we were either getting buyer feedback or actually had an offer and an official inspection that determined, hey, that the leak is still active underneath all the floor that he just put in. So then we were like, oh crap, this is not going to sell as a novation because now there's $15,000 of work that needs to be done, and he doesn't want to file an insurance claim, or he didn't have insurance, one of the two. So then we went back to him and we said, okay, in order for us to actually get you money and get this completed, we're going to have to convert this to an installment agreement. So we got a price reduction. We became owners of the property, and then we put in the work to finish it, had it listed, and then we essentially treated it like a flip. But the nice thing about those installment agreements is you can have an A to B closing, and you can get them like $3,000 up front tomorrow. You become owners of the property on title. You can refinance it, you can sell it, you can do whatever you want with it without needing their signature or anything. And then they get paid out the remaining funds on the B2C close. So it's a little bit more complicated. It's kind of a rare thing that we use, but it does have purpose.
Got a quick question. How do you guys manage those installment plans, or how do you guys pitch that, or how do you guys structure it?
Corey, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, so installment contracts aren't something we typically pitch, just to be clear on that. It is kind of the thing when everything else doesn't work, when we can come back. And here's the setup when it could. So it's basically we're pretty much at a cash close. So we're very close to our cash price. Maybe we need a little bit more, but we really feel like in order for us to monetize this, we're going to have to get it out to the broader market, right? The intent of us doing this is to get the seller some funds up front, and then to be able to market the property on the back end on the MLS. So go to the big buyers network. And so how we can structure that is it's basically like think of it like a shorter term seller finance or terms deal. And so normally we're giving the seller usually $3,000 to $5,000, something like that, to cover some debts, usually to get moved out. We will get on title. And so the pitch is more of like, again, this is not something we traditionally do, but it's like it sounds like you really need to move over to the next property. You need moving funds to get there. It's going to take you $5,000. Look, we can come up in price just a little bit, give you another $5,000, $10,000, something like that. If you can give us some time, if I can get you $5,000, like within a week, are you willing to work with us on this? And then we come up with a strategy and a plan for their move out time to get them into the new place. And then we give ourselves ample time, 6 months to a year sometimes, to actually market and get the property sold on the back end. So the reason that it's a little different is we're putting funds out front, we're giving them directly to the seller, but it gives us the ability to get on title, which gives us a ton of flexibility, because then we show as the owner, we can handle all of the negotiations. We never actually have to go back to them for a signature until the final close, right? When they're getting the rest of their funds out. So it has some flexibility and advantages, but it also has more risk to it because we're generally putting money out and getting on title. The disadvantage is that if you get on title with somebody who's going through a lot of their own credit issues, like theoretically, there could be another lien that gets thrown back on the property since they are not released as the owner of it. You're basically joint owners. So you have to be really careful to not want to get yourself extended in like a 2-year, 3-year, sometimes even a year with the wrong person, because if they go get themselves a giant lien slapped against your property, you're stuck with that. I hope that gives a little context to it. I hope I didn't go too far one direction.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. And
Oh, I was gonna say, I think it's also a tool, right? When you have someone's like, yeah, the price is great and everything works for me. I don't have any money whatsoever to my name to move. And then we can actually use it to get the price even deeper. And we're like, well, what if we could get you, $3,000 by the end of the week? If we did that, then we'd have to do this price, which is even lower than our cash offer. And a lot of times that'll work for them because they're like in such a bad situation.
got it. And then if you guys are putting money into the rehab and you guys get entitled, how does that affect holding costs if it takes several months to move on the market?
It depends. Depends on how you structure it. So if there's a debt or a mortgage in place, you can work it out with the homeowner where they are responsible for covering that mortgage. You can also work it out where you're going to be responsible for covering that mortgage. So it depends on how you structure it, really.
Got
If it's an owner, if there's no, yeah, I mean, same thing with like utilities, right? Like if they're moving out, you can say you're going to cover utilities. You can say they still have to cover utilities. Like there's a lot of flexibility, but it also means that you have to be very proactive with the communication about how to not to get yourself in trouble there.
Got it.
So I think it sounds like we might have another future training topic where we can really go deep on this because there's specific paperwork that we can use. Bringing it back to Novations, Corey, how do we make the transition from cash to Novations once we've and how can we be sure that we've fully extracted the lowest acceptable cash price from a seller?
So I would say like what our team is really working on and some people have been really effective at is if you can work up from a number. So let's say that they owe 200,000 on a property and then for them to get into that next place, let's say it's a downsizing situation, they're going to buy an RV. Like they're going to tell you a number that they want to get into that. And then they're going to tell you about hopefully you can extract the credit card debt or whatever other bills or obligations they have to pay off to be able to get into that next thing. Hopefully what you're doing is you're working up to like what they absolutely need. Right? That is being like their lowest acceptable offer. Well, if our cash price is 250 and we realize that they're going to need 50 grand to get into an RV, they need 200 to pay off their mortgage. And then they have 30 grand in high interest credit card debt that they have to pay off. Like our numbers aren't going to pencil there. And so we have to actually tell them like, look, this is the best we can do for cash. And then we have to have them tell us no and beat it up a couple of times. And so then after we get to that, because that's really important, you have to have them like, our guys all go out with a pen and paper or pad or something like that. And like, we'll have them write out the number and then like actually cross it off, like make a visible move that cashes off the table. And then afterwards we say, okay, how open-minded are you to potentially having more time and reasonable access if we can come up to a number that would make more sense? And so we use that as a soft intro. And then after we say, how open-minded are you? And they're like, well, okay, well, you can get me more. Let's talk about it. We basically say, look, we would need reasonable access and time. And we'd have to bring in a partner because we're not going to be our end buyer. If you want the certainty to know we have a specific date, specific time to close on, then that's our cash price. Is that going to work for you? Make them tell you no again. Okay, well, I think we can probably do, and then you pick the number, right? $30,000 to $33,000 more if we can get some reasonable time, reasonable access, because we're going to have to bring in a partner to get this done with. And then they're going to start the process of asking you, what does that mean? Okay, and then we're going to get into, okay, well, we're going to have to market the property. We're going to have to bring in our network of cash buyers or thousands of cash buyers. We're also going to get on the MLS. We can put it in front of more eyeballs than anyone else. And we're going to work together to make sure that you're locked in at a price that we can get done for you. We're just going to need some more time to do it. So that's kind of how we get into the pitch. And then there's usually some back and forth around, okay, what does access mean? How does that work? I'm afraid of, is usually the big thing. Like I'm afraid of people coming in. I'm afraid of my dogs being there. I'm afraid of whatever number of things that Tori gets to deal with on the back ends as our transaction coordinator. So it's just addressing those concerns and fears and laying out a plan that they feel comfortable with.
Corey, where do you think we struggle on the pitch the most? Or is it in the transition?
From what I see with our team, some of the time we get the initial visceral reaction of a no. We've spent 45 minutes to an hour in there with them. We've low anchored. We've started to work our way up. We give them hey, here's what it qualifies for at a cash offer. And they tell us no. And we're like, wait, don't run away, please. Don't, like, I just spent all this time with you. And so we like jump straight to our equity protection without actually doing like a soft introduction to it, which presents it as like a bit of a hesitation. Or I've seen us actually go in and say like, look, I'm going to have two options because we're afraid that if we say the first one is a cash offer, they're going to say no to it. Look, I got two options that are going to work for you. The first one's this one. They're just going to say no. Okay, what's your next option? But in their mind, we haven't created enough of a barrier or difference to say why the second option is we're going to acquire more friction for them, right? People walking in your house, having a realtor list the property, having showings that are sometimes at inopportune times, like that can happen with a novation. So you have to make sure that they understand that the value they're getting is the $30,000 to $40,000 more.
Right. And creating that delta, we're actually trying to get them to take the lower offer, right? That's the whole point of this. Is we're trying to pitch certainty, that guarantee, right? That's a better deal for us. It's 100% outcome for them. Like that is always the best way. But in order to do that, you do have to create a big enough delta and then explain to them kind of the pitfalls of, well, in order to get you that higher price, this is what's going to happen. And that's not for everybody. Tori, how about on the back end for you? What are some things that you hear that our team does really well or that they might struggle with when you're talking to sellers post-contract signing?
Yeah, so the struggle and the thing they do really well is actually the same thing. And it depends purely on how many times they've had an opportunity to pitch equity protection. So like 9.5 times out of 10, the first 2 to 4 pitches of the equity protection program end up being a small disaster on the back end. Not because anybody's doing something wrong, but because it is incredibly hard to get somebody to shift their focus from guaranteed offer to not a guarantee. It's a skill set in itself. And so when you're talking to somebody and you're like, hey, here's our cash number, and they're like, no, that won't work. And then you're like, okay, I can give you this other option if you guys qualify. It's not a guarantee, but this is the number. All they're going to hear is that number unless you say it several times and you have a full stop. When you have not pitched this very many times and you haven't had the opportunity to practice it very much, it's really easy to hear their excitement and their yes and say, okay, cool, they understand. And so that's something that our team does incredibly well. It's been a really long time since I've had somebody that they were like, wait, why are you getting a realtor involved? I thought you were buying my house. But it is really common the first few times. And it's important to remember, it's not because you've done something wrong. It's because those people are going to hear what they're going to hear. And so you have to use those experiences to hone your skill set and really refine that pitch to where they do understand on future transactions.
Sorry, do you guys have like a script or just a basic bullet point system that you guys use just to make sure you guys cover all your bases during the pitch?
Is that pre-contract or post-contract?
Pre-contract when you're transitioning as an option in case cash doesn't work.
Yes, we do. We do have it somewhere. I know Corey had to take a step out call, but Corey has access to that. Yes.
On the post signing side of things, I also make sure that I run through things very intentionally on the very first call. So if we have somebody that has a cash contract, I'll say, okay, you qualified for our cash contract option. This is what this means. This is what it looks like. Here are the next steps. Same thing with that equity protection program. And I actually slow it down way more with the novation side than with a cash contract because it is more complex. And so I say, your contract with us is our equity protection program. What that means is we are going to match your house with its perfect final buyer. So I spin it like we're going to be the matchmaker. We're not actually the person that's buying your house. And so that really helps hammer home what they were receiving in the appointment. And it really gets ahead of anything like that where they're like, oh, I didn't understand this. And then I say, oh, well, didn't Roy talk to you about our cash offer? And what happened when he offered our cash price? Oh, it was too low. Okay, so that's why he set you up with this equity protection program so that we can get you your price. We just need a little bit more of your cooperation and we're going to still do all of the legwork.
That is so key that you just said that, because for our company, there was life before Tori or before a really good transaction coordinator and life after. And exactly what she just said is she's reselling and really reminding them what they agreed to in the contract.
Where did you find Tori? You're really good at your job.
I was stolen. I was a referral.
Nice.
Yes. If you do nothing else, having that speed to contact ideally within 24 hours, but definitely within 48 hours of that contract signed, if someone from your team, other than the salesperson that got the contract, reaching out to establish that relationship and that connection is so vital. It'll make you seem like a totally professional organization that has their act together, and then their buy-in and cooperation will be way higher. If you don't do that, or you're not reminding them what they signed up for, it's going to be like pulling teeth every time to do a showing. And don't get me wrong, we're not perfect. We still have sellers that they either conveniently forget things, or they're just in a really stressful situation that they can't function normally. But elevating your chances of having the whole process go smoothly, having clear access, not having any weird things come up, that's so vital.
One other piggyback on that, I could talk about the intro call all day, so I won't get too in the weeds there. But something that I found really helps to set up these novations for success, because they want that easy process. They don't really want a bunch of people tromping around their house, is to just acknowledge, like, this is going to feel overwhelming. And when you get frustrated by this, I'm here when you need to vent. I'm your safe person to vent to. You can get frustrated, you can get overwhelmed. But I usually say when you get overwhelmed, not if you get overwhelmed. I just automatically assume this person is going to be like, dear God, enough. Like, you've had 5 showings this week. When is this ever going to end? Because if you get ahead of that and you acknowledge that they are going to have those feelings and that they're valid, it has decreased the amount of frustrated calls that I've gotten by probably 90%.
Corey, do you have your intro calls to your sellers, like the scripting for it, or are you just shooting from the hip?
So I don't have it formally written out, but I would be more than happy to put something together. And then if you want to reach out to me, we can set up a call and I can just kind of walk you through what my process looks like post signing.
Okay, yeah, I would love that. That would be really helpful.
Tori, you should also put that together, since we're hiring a TC soon and we'll need it anyways.
Oh, it's coming. All the good things.
All right, we've got about 9 minutes left for open Q&A. What you got?
Question. So do you guys get this objection? And if you guys do, how do you handle it when presenting this equity protection program? If the potential seller, if they say, well, why would this be better than just going with an agent directly?
Michael, you want to take that one?
I can take it.
I really lean into what we do and what makes us good. So one of my things, any idiot with a rich uncle can be an investor, but it's a company's ability to market a house. So when we have a house, we have a whole process for how we turn around and sell that. And basically what we're offering to these people is we're letting them into our world, and we're going to do for them what we do for ourselves when we have a house. And the big thing is to look, they've said no to cash, and you're hesitant. You're like, well, maybe there is a way, and it's going to require more time and access. There's going to be some headaches involved, but it's not a guaranteed price. But we do this like clockwork all the time, and we've developed a really good system for doing it. And it's the number of people that are on standby every day waiting for the email to drop that Offer Now has a new home up for sale. That makes us good. Because when you just market to the general public, you're dealing then with the general public. And we're dealing with this little army of investors that are waiting for something to go live from us. And we're just allowing them to use basically our system that we've developed over time, which makes us good. So when they're talking about, because it can seem like it's the same, oh, it's just using the MLS and there's an agent, and that's fine. But we're in the trenches every day. I mean, we were talking about it the other day. We're buying 8 to 10 properties a month. What do we have? 17 houses on the market right now. That experience, that expertise, you're not going to find an agent with that. What do they have? 1, maybe 2 listings right now. And so it's just they're being brought into our world, and we're now going to sell their house the way we sell our own. And it's just much more effective. And it does solve a lot of problems. You're not going to have to do this and this and this to the home. And so it's just showing the value of this. I don't even let them really compare the two. Just because there are similarities doesn't mean they're the same thing. And I just really drive that home.
Love that. I would also add, any story tells help really drive the point home. When you're explaining what the value is, the good and bad parts, any story tells you have of however many hundreds of calls or sellers you've ever worked with that listed with an agent and couldn't get the property sold. That went through 6 months It got to Christmas, their property still wasn't sold after 5 price reductions. What happened to them? Again, the goal of all of this explaining and value proposition is to get them to decide and commit to something. If they want to list with an agent, that's fine. But here's what could happen. Do they accept that risk? And if they do, that's totally fine, right? We're on to the next lead. We're on to the next opportunity. So we're not going to convince people that they should absolutely list with us if it's not the right option for them. But we're also telling them, like, we are the best chance at getting this price that you want and getting the property done.
Got it. Thank you.
What other questions do we have?
How competitive would you say it usually is when you go novation? Like, are you going up against a bunch of other cash offers, or is it like you're the only one in the room typically?
I mean, that's going to really vary by lead source. Obviously, on that, that's what makes it's kind of funny because we've been talking about this as a team, but our outbound lead deal size is like 1.5 as big as our inbound deal size. And that's because a lot of times on inbound, you're facing multiple offers or multiple investors. And with outbound cold caller texts, a lot of times you're the only one meeting with the homeowner, but it just takes a lot more work on the front end to get those appointments. Novation and terms are just ways to differentiate yourself from other people, right? Most of the time when most investors or wholesalers are meeting with an owner on a cash number, they're probably going to be within, 5% of each other most of the time. So having any other tool in your tool bag just to show them that you're different, a lot of those people will still end up taking your cash offer, but because now you have another option, they feel listened to and they feel like you're a more credible source for them just because your expertise is higher. I don't know if that answered the question.
It did. Thank you.
Corey, how about one thing our team is really exceptional at with Novations?
They've done a really good job of setting the right expectations recently, which is that this is not a guarantee, getting them committed that they're going to have to allow reasonable access to the property. And then I think that really continues onto the transaction side. And so I think Tori does an incredible job of communication and setting the right expectations up front, because what's going to happen is they're going to go through this process of like an hour to 2 hours, and then they're going to hear all the things you're saying and forget about 50% of it. So they're going to have to be reminded about what they agreed to, probably 3 to 4 times. And so what often happens is that you do a great job as a salesperson, you set the right expectations, and then the first round of showings happen and they have a meltdown because they're not used to having people in their house and it's a friction point. And so then that comes back to whoever's handling that disposition transaction side. And I think we do a really good job of diffusing and calming that down. And then it comes back to like, when we were there, we told you this, right? You remember when Michael said, okay, and we record our appointments. That way we can go back to that.
I guess just based on that, Corey, what do you guys use to record your in-person appointments, and how do you guys deconstruct that for like training?
Yeah, and so let me disclaimer, every state's different. Idaho is a one-party consent state, so we can give consent to record every conversation. Some states, I'm not sure if Washington's a two-party consent state or the one you're in. We use just like a little wristwatch bracelet that we just like turn on and off when we go to appointment, but every time you try to like do a walkthrough video, it usually cuts that off, so you have to remember to restart it. So we found a little, I think Michael even grabbed like a one off Amazon, like a little pen looking thing that he throws into like his binder. So those can be really helpful when they like swear up and down. That was never ever described to me, told to me. And then we bring the recording out at the end. It was like, here's what you said. Oh, and it usually is a good chance to diffuse and to CYA in case it goes legal.
Do you guys use a specific app or anything like that?
No, it's just the recording devices, and then it downloads as like an MP3 or a WAV file, and then we just upload that to like our internal drive and documents.
Got it. And do you guys record it for every interaction or just whenever possible?
We record it for every single appointment we go on, and then all of our calls are recorded.
If it's a virtual appointment for us, which for us is like outside of an hour drive time, it's over Zoom or Google Meet. Those are also all recorded.
And for me,
Yeah,
go
ahead.
What's the ratio of your total deals that you would say are novations?
I think it's roughly 50% right now.
Really?
I
Wow.
Yeah.
just ran that, actually. I was kind of curious what that would be.
I know in prior years, James, it's been higher because when interest rates rose and the market was declining, selling cash deals was pretty difficult, right? So it's actually been higher in years when the market is worse. We need a bigger buyer pool.
It just blows me away. And like, we talk about this all the time, novations, I mean, we do novations, but we don't do many. And they're never very big, and they're pretty much always a pain in the butt. And so I'm just astounded that you guys are doing 50% of your volume in Novations. Like, I can't tell if it's just that you're converting deals that you could have done cash maybe into bigger deals as Novations, or if there's stuff that like you would have just not been able to convert on at all that you end up turning into Novation, or both things maybe.
So, Corey, what are the actual numbers, just so I'm not talking out of my ass?
Yeah, so we actually just ran that. I did it at the beginning of this meeting here. So we've signed 98 contracts so far this year, and 31 of those have been Novations. So we're at 30% of our contract volume. And to James's point, we really, really struggled in the first like 6 months to a year to like find our personal value proposition. And I think that came through to homeowners, because we were like, I would say I personally struggled with it, because I'm like, why wouldn't you just list? And I had to like get over the mental hurdle that a lot of people really, really don't want to deal with the real estate cycle, even though like they just don't actually want to be the first person interfacing with an agent and then reviewing offers. And so when we can provide a barrier and a buffer, like we actually can provide a better service than what they experience traditionally. And so I would ask you to like take a look at yourself and say like, am I able to pitch a Novation with as much confidence as I can cash? And if you can't, that's probably somewhere like mindset wise that we have to work on first. But then it comes back to the service you put on the back end.
So maybe we're losing out to Novations where we're not pitching our value enough, because a lot of times people, you guys know this type of client, right? They're like, I called 5 cash buyers. I just want them to all give me their number. And then if it's not high enough, I also know an agent that I'm just going to list with if I don't get my number. And it's like, maybe that's a potential Novation that we're just not pitching properly. But yeah, like it just, I get all the objection handling. I get how it should be pitched. It makes sense. I just don't find a ton of clients where I'm like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. The other thing, I don't know how it is in Boise right now. Inventory is ridiculously high in Colorado. So like listing these things, I'm just concerned it's going to take 90 days, 120 days to sell. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I was going to mention that. So James, right now, especially seasonally, so a few things on the numbers. Corey presented 30%. That's year to date, right, Corey?
Yep.
So Q1 and Q2 are always our smallest percentage of Novations. That's when we do our highest volume of cash deals. Q3 and Q4, we always do more Novations and terms deals just seasonally. Right now, though, we are doing, as we shift towards the end of the summer into fall, we no longer do 90 days for Novations. We do 120 days.
Yeah.
And of course, we can always close earlier, but that's the expectation we're setting. And we're also pricing these anywhere from 5 to 10% lower than what we actually think they could sell for on the market. Very key, because we know seasonally that inventory's going up, prices are going to start falling. In order to stand out, we have to be the lowest dollar per square foot priced home in the neighborhood.
Right. Yeah. So you're just undershooting the value to sell fast.
Yeah. Where Novations really come into play are the rural properties. Anything that's like over a half acre, or that has, right? Because your investors, unless it's buildable lots, that's a whole different ball game. But like recreational acreage is great for owner occupants. Investors don't care unless you can build on it, right? So all of those are going to go Novation.
Yeah, those make sense to me, because we do so much inbound marketing. We get a ton of leads in places that we just don't want, like tiny little Colorado towns that no one's ever heard of. And like for me, yeah, we should just shoot for like a 50% discount cash. And if that doesn't work, then we just push it straight to Novation. Like that's definitely an area that we struggle. It's like, is it worth our time to pursue this lead? Or, is Jorge gonna like spin his wheels trying to sell this thing? So that makes a lot of sense to me. But yeah, we just haven't quite found how it fits in. Like we did 50 deals in the past year, and I think like 2 of those were Novation, something like that.
It took us a lot of time. Like it took us really a year of committing to it and failing our way through it to get to a point where we feel pretty confident in how we pitch it now.
Right. But the biggest hurdle you're saying was AMs making the pitch.
Yeah. Feeling confident about the value proposition.
Right.
Because I think it takes a certain number of people. When we started Novations, we didn't get assigned POA. And
Yeah,
so
That's a mess.
what you think is like, oh, sellers want to be included in this communication because
No.
it's their property, like it's their pride and joy. They've lived there 20 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And when we found out that they're like, why are you contacting me? I don't
Mhm.
care, just get it sold.
Yeah.
Then you're like, oh my gosh, people, just the mere thought of any kind of price renegotiation. Hey, we found this on the inspection report and now we're going to have to do this. Like the mere thought of that stresses people out so
Stressful.
much.
Straight
Yeah.
up. Stresses
Yeah.
me out.
There
I
you
want to
go.
sell my stuff on Novation.
So it's actually less about like you versus the realtor and more about holding someone's hand through the process versus them doing something else.
For sure. Yeah, I feel like the process stuff, yeah, I get what you're saying. I kind of feel like we have that ironed out. But yeah, maybe it is like a value proposition combined with the pitch type of thing that maybe is the missing link. So yeah, really appreciate the info, guys. I always think these conversations are valuable.
I think too, if somebody is truly trying to get the top price that they possibly can, they're not a good fit for us, and they should list it with an agent. But how many people straddle both sides of the fence where they're like, I want top price and I also have a problem / some pain, and I want both things. And that's where we have to go in with the different pitches and really dissect why a cash offer won't work. Okay, that helps us get to the truth of what they really need, and then we can help them match that right solution. All right. I can stay on another couple minutes here, but are there any final questions?
I've got one quick one. Sorry to drag it on, but I'm curious if you have any data around like the general price point that your novations fall under. Because I guess to talk you through where that question comes from, I think through like this property I saw in Denver the other week, right? We needed to be somewhere around 700, low 700s. They wanted, 750, 760, something like that. We can't get that high on cash. We also can't get that high on Novation because on the market, it might be able to sell upper 700s, maybe, but like once you back out commissions at that high of a price point, it's like we almost need to be at or below our cash number.
Corey, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so it all comes back to, I would say in general, like we're below the median value for homes that we do novations on. However, we've done stuff. So our market might be a little bit lower priced than Denver right now, but we've done stuff in our like more bougie neighborhoods that have been $700,000 equity protection prices that we list for $1 million, or we list for 850,000. And it comes back to your underwriting then. So you can do a novation at the top end of your market. You just should know that you still have to make the numbers pencil, right? So I would just be really conservative with your cash price. If you don't think you're going to be anywhere close, just anchor it at like 500. And then that gives you 70K a play for your equity protection to come up. That's at least how we approach these ones that have higher dollar signs. And we've got 50, 60K rips off of these higher end properties because there's just more margin to play with.
This has everything to do with how low are you third person price anchoring. For us, we third person low anchor at 50% of tax assessed value, and how uncomfortable that feels. But when you do that, it gives you so much room to get to their lowest acceptable offer and then split off based on the different kind of offering or value proposition you can give in these different options. But it really does start with anchoring way lower than you actually feel comfortable with.
Interesting. So if it's a competitive situation, would you say that sometimes you will cap your cash number probably 20, 30K below where other people are going to give their cash number, so that you have the ability to give a novation number that is 10, 20K above where other people would pitch cash?
You've got to create that separation and that barrier in their mind for why the value statement's there. So yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Interesting.
I'll tell you, like we had one of the bigger properties we did for almost a year. I think we ended up reselling it for 850 or 875. But it was like a horse property, 3,500 square feet and like 3 acres, just like outside of one of our metros, not far, but like 5 miles outside. People went crazy for it because it was a horse property. It took us 2 months to get an offer. We ended up having a multiple offer situation, and got it sold, but it worked because we knew we didn't have a cash buyer network for that, because it's not going to be a residence you could rent out. So we intentionally capped our cash price to make our equity protection, our novations, sound more attractive.
Yeah, and I think too, of course, having different options is a great way to differentiate yourself from other investors, but so is having sales ability to scorch earth and saying, hey, you could accept that higher cash offer. Do they have proof of funds? Are they willing to put down $10,000 non-refundable earnest money? Are they willing to waive their inspection? I'm happy to go through their contract with you to poke some holes in it just to make sure you're protected if we're not the right fit for you. I'm willing to do that for you. How much trust and credibility does that build? Because in a multiple offer situation, literally, this happened this year. We went head to head with a few other investors. They signed with somebody else. That investor messaged us and we're like, hey, I just got this property under contract. Can you help me dispo it? So now that becomes a story tell when we're in sellers' homes. Oh, they're just going to send it to us to buy anyways. Here's how that happened, right? And so you're just positioning yourself as the market authority there as well. And then you also have the different options to sprinkle on top. You're the no-brainer pick. You're not going to get 100%, but you'll get more.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining today.